All right, so Nintendo Switch is probably wrapping up. I've seen some articles talking about, hey, is it time for Nintendo to make a new console? And I think those are funny because, yeah, man, they're absolutely working on it. Just because we don't hear about it doesn't mean they're not working on it. They got an entire division of their company that's focused on hardware, whether it's the Nintendo Labo or the controllers or the system upgrades or whatever, like or a new system. They're definitely doing it. They're up to something. And if you look at the games that have come out for the Switch, there's not a whole lot left. Like we've gotten all the big games. We're two generations of Pokemon in. We've got the second mainline Legend of Zelda game coming out in May, Tears of the Kingdom. We've got the Mario game. We've got the Mario Kart game. We've got pretty much everything at this point. We got some Splatoons. We got Animal Crossing. Like they're done. They're made. Um, if you look at the individual development studios and sections of the company that Nintendo has, they kind of have a weird setup in that there's an internal development studios that are fully in-house, and then there's external development studios that are also the same company for some reason, sometimes even in the same like building. And then they got external developers of second party developers and people they have partnerships with and whatever. But if you go down the line at all of those different facets of the company, like they've done the big thing that they're supposed to do, and they're either working on a thing that's about to come out or that we know of it's going to come out, or they're probably working on the next thing. Like, for example, the Zelda team, right? They're working on Tears of the Kingdom, and we know about that. The team that does Splatoon and Animal Crossing, the last Splatoon came out, and I imagine most of their resources going forward will be working on something for the next system. If you look at the external development teams, or like you know that Metroid Prime 4 is coming, and other than that, we don't know a lot about a lot of things. It's like Tears of the Kingdom, Fire Emblem Engage is coming out soon, Metroid Prime 4, and then like the Pikmin game is supposedly coming, but we'll see. It's been supposedly coming for a long time. But it seems like the company is working on future stuff or should be working on future stuff because honestly, how many more iterations of these games should come out for the Switch? Like it's definitely happening. I would imagine we're probably gonna hear about a new Nintendo system next year, and then maybe it'll come out the year after that. I don't know. Maybe they got enough games to last into next year's holiday season. I'm sure they'll come up with something. But if you looked at the end of the Wii, it kind of petered off until the next system showed up. So it's definitely coming. But the Switch has been very successful. Let's talk about how successful it is. Basically Nintendo's highest selling system at this point in time. Sorry, highest selling console system. The Switch is kind of a awkward thing to compare numbers to because it's both a handheld and a console system. But if you're going off of just console numbers, it is. I think it's outsold everything. It's outsold the Wii. It's outsold the NES. It's definitely outsold the Wii U. So yeah, but when it comes to handheld, it's not as impressive. It sold more than the Game Boy Advance. I don't think it's sold more than the 3DS. It hasn't sold more than the DS. I'm trying to find the original Game Boy figures. It may have sold more than the original Game Boy. I'm not sure about that, but it's got a ways to go to catch up with the DS, and then it might not. It might not. We'll see. Now, the fact that it sold so many consoles means that there's an opportunity for a lot of its games to sell equally large figures. And if you look at the top 10, or no, if you look at the top selling if you look at the top selling Switch games, it's kind of crazy how many of these franchises have had just like a stupid success on the Switch. Mario Kart is always a really successful series on any Nintendo system, but it is the highest selling game for the Switch, which is funny because it's essentially a deluxe. I mean, it's called Mario 8 Deluxe. I believe it is a deluxe version of the Mario Kart for Wii U, and it has sold 48 million copies. It is still making money. They're still doing downloadable content for it. I haven't done any of the downloadable content, but I have Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I haven't played it a whole lot. I think it was one of those games like, oh, it'll be like the multiplayer party game, and we haven't had many occasions to bust out a multiplayer party game. But I did see something saying that it was like people consider it the best kart racer game of all time or Mario Kart game of all time, and I was like, man, do they? I feel like I'm out of the loop there, but 48 million copies is kind of ridiculous. There are examples of other games, other franchises on the Switch that have done even sillier things. Like, for example, it came out like in the middle of the pandemic. It was probably a very great time for it to come out, just because a lot of people were home and they needed something to take their mind off of everything else. But Animal Crossing New Horizons is the second best selling game on the Switch, and you could argue it's like maybe their second most important franchise, like of all of them, when it comes to like game sales. It sold 40 million copies. Like that is ridiculous. I remember playing the original Animal Crossing on GameCube, and never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that this random, weird game in a genre that wasn't super popular at the time. Though if you think about it, it's sort of in the same genre as like Sims. Um, would be like one of Nintendo's most important properties. But 40 million copies for the Switch. It has sold really well on other handheld consoles or other handheld systems for Nintendo. So I guess we shouldn't be super surprised by that. But it's really important. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate always sells well. It did sell 30 million copies for the Switch. I don't know off the top of my head if that's like the best selling version of Smash Brothers, but 30 million is. Let me put it this way: my favorite Smash Brothers game, Melee. Just gonna tell the cat to stop messing with something. My favorite Smash Brothers game, Melee, came out on a system that less people bought that system than bought this particular game for the Switch. So, wow. Coming in at fourth on the list is another core Nintendo title. It's Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. That game is pretty much universally like beloved at this point, and it is in fact the best-selling Zelda game, probably by far, in the franchise. Like 28 million. Zelda is one of those things that everyone likes and is a really important Nintendo franchise, but it's not one of the higher sellers. Like, it's not compared to Mario Kart or Smash Brothers or Pokemon. Like, it doesn't sell as much as you would hope and think. 28 million is like crazy for a Zelda game. I think there was one point in time when the Switch was coming out and launching that they had sold more copies of Breath of the Wild than they had sold Switches, because people just wanted the game and knew they would eventually get the Switch for it. But it must have continued to sell well to get to 28 million copies. In fact, at this point in time, it is crazy to imagine, but Zelda Breath of the Wild actually has outsold Pokemon Sword and Shield on the Switch. I don't know if that's like ever happened, that a Zelda game is outsold like a mainline Pokemon game on the system. Obviously, there has been many times that the mainline Zelda game is on the same system as the mainline Pokemon game, since usually Pokemon was a handheld system. But with this one, they combined all their handheld franchises and all their console franchises, I guess you could say. Like I said, Sword and Shield is at 25 million copies. I think 20s tends to be the Pokemon number. Obviously, they have they've made that easier for them by just continuing to make a whole bunch of Pokemon games. But Sword and Shield, 25 million. Super Mario Odyssey, 24.4 million. I thought Odyssey was really good. I really, really enjoyed it. It seemed like an improved version of a Mario platformer. I really liked a lot of the art design choices they made, and it just seems like the culmination of all their knowledge when it comes to 3D platforming that they've gained over the years. So, and probably in a direct comparison between Odyssey and like 64, like it's kind of no. If you're taking away the nostalgia lens, it's kind of no contest. Mario Odyssey is just really good. Super Mario Party comes in at number 7 at 18 million copies. That's pretty crazy. I haven't played a Mario game or a Mario Party game in quite a while. One little note: this was a game developed by ND Cube, which I pretty let me just check and see if it's, yeah, it is one of those subsidiaries of Nintendo that they consider external, but it is actually completely owned by the company. So that is the highest one on the list. That's not Pokemon, Game Freak, or not whatever combination of people works on the Smash Brothers series. It gets a little complicated, but number 8 is, like I said, a Pokemon game. They just kind of make so many that it adds up to like 60 million copies of Pokemon sold. This one was Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I did get this one. I played the ever-loving crap out of the original Diamond and Pearl games, and I didn't really know what to think about this remake. It was like the first remake they've done. Okay, there's a cat that's causing all kind of mischief over there. You need to stop scratching that. It was the first remake they've done that wasn't like an enhanced remake and a better version of the original game. I mean, part of me wanted to play like an older school Pokemon, but not for $60 and not for what it looked like. Like I don't know, it just kind of looked weird and cheap, and I didn't know if I needed to play the 4th gen again, so I didn't end up getting it. 15 million copies is what they sold for that. I'm not sure the numbers to compare with other remakes, but another completely random game that I never played, but obviously it was very successful for Nintendo and the Switch, was Ring Fit Adventure. I think they have an internal development group that does kind of the weird stuff, and I think Ring Fit Adventure was probably their biggest success on the Switch. Number 10 is another Pokemon game that I also did not play. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. I think that was kind of the big holiday one for that year of 2018. And it sold almost 15 million copies, so obviously, it must have been a big success. I didn't play it, so there are probably a little bit too many Pokemon games released lately for me to attempt to play all of them. And speaking of which, 11 is Pokemon Legends Arceus. It seemed a really interesting concept, the whole open world thing, and I just didn't get it. It's sold almost 14 million copies, so good for them. New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe is another port, or another enhanced port, the deluxe version, I guess you could say, of a Wii U game. They did a lot of these, which I appreciated because I didn't actually play the Wii U at all. So them managing to put all their best Wii U games out on the Switch was really helpful for lazy people like me that didn't bother with the Wii U. New Super Mario Bros. Deluxe was pretty fun. I like, obviously, I have a soft spot for 2D Mario platforming, and Nina was kind of asking me, my wife was kind of asking me, like, hey, what kind of Mario platform would you want? Because I was playing the 3D one, the 3D, 2D, whatever you want to call it, New Super Mario Bros. 3D on at nephew's place, and I don't know, just kind of like the depth of field thing was a little bit hard for me to accurately make jumps. It was a little frustrating. I was like, I just kind of want the 2D one, and it was fun. The new Super Mario Bros. Series is always fun. I think sales-wise, it's kind of dipped a bit. It was pretty important on the Wii. It sold a whole bunch, and I think maybe there's just too many of them at this point in time. people aren't really like focusing on one of the new Super Mario Bros. As much. Splatoon 2 is 13th at 13 million copies. Again, it's just crazy how many people have bought some of these games. 13 million copies on a lot of systems for Nintendo would just be like a runaway smash success. And the fact that we're still above 10 million copies sold and at the 13th game really shows how successful this one was. Splatoon 2 is probably one of their newest properties. Splatoon is probably one of their newest properties that has been really important for Nintendo in the past couple consoles. Like I said before, it is the same group that does Animal Crossing. So the fact that one group has Animal Crossing and Splatoon shows they're a pretty important group right now for the company. Luigi's Mansion 3 is at 11.43 million copies. I'm going to go ahead and assume that's probably the best selling Luigi's Mansion game. I don't have that information at the top of my head, but the original Luigi's Mansion came out for GameCube, and obviously GameCube's only sold 20 million GameCubes, so I'm going to go ahead and imagine it outsold that. Luigi's Mansion is one of the examples of Nintendo farming out, I guess you could say, one of its franchises. Some of the minor franchises I've noticed lately, they tend to, I don't want to say co-develop. They have internal development groups that are strictly there to work with outside studios, and Next Level Games is an example of that. It's what they consider an outside studio, even though I believe it's wholly owned by Nintendo. But Next Level Games is in charge of Luigi's Mansion, and then there's Super Mario Strikers series. So they're actually a Canadian studio, I believe. Yeah, they're in Vancouver. So they own them outright, and they've given them Luigi's Mansion. I think they've done a pretty good job with that. Number 15 at 10 million. So we'll go ahead and stop the list right here at 10 million. But there's 15 games that have sold more than 10 million copies, which is really good. And that's Pokemon Scarlet and Violet so far. It sold 10 million copies in like a week. It's going to sell a lot more. I will be curious if it sells more than Sword and Shield. You feel like it wouldn't because you think that would be the same player base, but with how many more people own Switches now, it's entirely possible that it outsells Sword and Shield, and I think the open world mechanics of it have been pretty exciting to people so far, even though the game is kind of buggy. Like the idea of open world Pokemon, I think, is really appealing to people. So I imagine that 10 million number will shoot up pretty high. Is there anything else to mention here? Splatoon 3 just came out, and I'm sure that number will probably shoot up there pretty soon as well. Monster Hunter Rise, I noticed, is like the highest third-party game on this list. It sold 7.7 million copies, and that is a Capcom title. So many of Nintendo's biggest games are either made and developed directly by the company itself, or kind of farmed out to these second-party developers. So they keep a lot of it in-house. A lot of their most important games are there. But overall, the Switch has done stupid successful. I have really enjoyed the Switch myself, being able to play it handheld or play it on the console. I've stuck mostly to not downloaded games. I've stuck mostly to physical copies, which I think has been a good idea. There wasn't a whole lot of memory on that. I did finally need a memory card to play a downloadable game. I played a Jurassic Park Park Builder game that there wasn't a physical copy, so I did have to download it. We did have an issue with Joy-Con though. Joy-Con drift though. The left controller ended up getting the drift, and it just got to a point where I know we could have mailed it in and all that, but it just got to a point where we just bought a new one. I'm sure hopefully at some point we'll mail it in before they still are replacing them. But it's been a fun system, and in the next video I'll kind of talk about what Nintendo does from here.